Hi, everyone. My name is Andrea Stennett. I am a research neurophysiotherapist. I currently work with the Barts MS team and at Queen Mary University of London. So I've been given the opportunity to share my poster with you entitled Remote Monitoring in People with Multiple Sclerosis During the COVID-19 Pandemic. So the COVID-19 pandemic caused major disruptions to healthcare services right across the UK, but certainly around the world as well. And within our team, there was this massive shift from face-to-face consultations to remote consultations. And so whilst that solved one problem, it created another in that we were having to have discussions about what are we going to do with the assessments that we would normally complete during our face-to-face clinics. And so after many deliberations, we came up with the remote monitoring service. So this project is really to take a step back to evaluate the remote monitoring service because it started so quickly and to see whether or not there are any gaps and how we can improve the service moving forward. So there are three key objectives. So I was interested really to look at the level of engagement of people with MS with remote monitoring during the period May 2020 to July 2020. Another objective was to ascertain whether or not the creation of the remote monitoring service unintentionally excluded some people with MS from remote monitoring. Because as I said, it started so quickly. And the third thing I was interested in was to compare the disability scores. So the scores that we had completed in clinic, so the in-clinic assessments, to compare them to the self-assessments that we're asking people to do at home. So just to give you an idea of what we did. So these are the tools that we used in remote monitoring. So first of all, we asked people to complete the web EDSS. We asked them to also complete the 9-hole peg test. So that looks at hand function. We asked them to complete also the timed 25-foot walk test, which is a measure of lower limb function. And finally, we asked them to complete the Able Hand questionnaire. So this is a questionnaire that asks about how you complete daily activities using your hands. And then what we did also was redesigned our clinic letter. And this was really to inform people of the change from face-to-face consultations to remote consultation, and with that remote monitoring. And so this is just an excerpt from one of the clinic letters. It was very basic, it's just one page, and it highlighted the assessments that we were asking people to do. And one of the other things that we said was, okay, maybe people don't know how to do these assessments because this was the first time we're asking most of them to complete it at home. So what we did, we provided video links to the assessments via the Clinic Speak website so they could watch the videos beforehand and then complete the assessments. We also provided them with a scoring sheet so they could enter their scores in and return the results to us. So once they returned their scores, we would upload them to the electronic system. So interested also in relation to this project to really look at the demographic profile. And so what I did was looked at the scores that people were sending to us, and I used descriptive statistics and the Wilkinson signed rank sum test to help with the analyses. And because this was a project, we registered it with the clinical effectiveness unit. Just to run through the results with you. So 100 people were contacted during the study time frame with a mean age of 46 years. 41 returned their remote monitoring, self-reported to have had a relapse during that time frame. Now, one of the objectives around whether or not we were unintentionally missing people. So I wanted to look at the responders. So quite often as researchers, we tend to look at people who are responding, but I think you can gain a lot of information from non-responders as well. And to do this, I looked at people who are responding to the remote monitoring and those who weren't. And I was interested to see whether or not there were any differences between the responders and the non-responders in terms of their demographic profile. So I was interested in age, gender, type of MS, EDSS, ethnicity, and whether or not they were on any disease-modifying therapies. But the results, when we completed the assessments, there were no significant differences between the responders and the non-responders in terms of their demographic profile. But what we did find was that people who were on disease-modifying therapies were more likely to return their remote monitoring scores to us. The other thing I want to highlight on this slide is that based in East London, so we serve a very diverse population. We were interested to see whether or not we were missing any particular people groups, but we were unable to make any judgments about this because one thing this project highlighted was that our ethnicity recording was very limited. So when I looked at changes in disability, so the assessments that we did in clinic prior to COVID-19 and the self-assessments that people were doing at home, they were pretty much stable over that time frame. So there were no significant differences between the Abelhan scores, between the 2 time points and the 9-hole peg test scores. But what we did find was that there was a significant difference between the time 25 for walk test when we looked at the two time points. So what can we say then about this project? Well, it was a snapshot view of a moment in time, very small data, but it offers us nonetheless some insight. So what we can say is that remote monitoring offers an additional module of care to support people with MS with the necessary tools to monitor their condition at home during the pandemic. We can also say that it provides the opportunity for patient activation, engagement, and self-management purely because we're giving them the tools to be able to do this and the knowledge to do it. There was no evidence that some people with MS were unintentionally excluded from the remote monitoring service based on their demographic profile. But as I said, our data in terms of ethnicity recording was very limited. So that's something that we have to look at moving forward. And what we found as well was that people with MS and disease-modifying therapies were more likely to return their remote monitoring scores to us. And we think that might be because they're used to being monitored. But when you look at changes in disability, they were pretty much stable over time. And so you began to ask the question, so what was it about the time 25-foot walk test score that showed a significant difference? And my assumption is that perhaps the pandemic had a negative impact on physical activity and sedentary behaviors, because we know the time frame that we're looking at was between May 2020 and July 2020, and that was in the middle of the lockdown. And we know anecdotally that people have been saying, they were less physically active during that time frame. So that's one assumption. The other assumption as well could be that measuring the distance from the distance with the time 25-foot walk test, there might be some accuracy with that, but we're not sure. I think we'll have to tease this out a little bit more. These are just assumptions. And this is the first time that we're doing this. And so we now have an idea about what the standards should be in terms of how quickly people are returning scores to us and what the scores are looking like. And I think it will set up in the future an audit so we can look to see whether or not systems are in place to make sure that we're responsive to the needs of people with MS. And by that, what I mean, if you notice that there is a clinical significant progression or reduction in scores, you can actually contact the patients and ask them if there are any changes, what do they think? And it also opens up the discussion about whether or not they need additional support within the community from the wider multidisciplinary team. And finally, I think what we need to do as well is really look at the experiences of people of the remote monitoring service. So ask them their views and opinions about how they felt the service worked for them or didn't work, or whether or not they can give us ideas about how we can improve that. So looking at the experiences moving forward. So with that, I would like to thank you for listening, and I have some acknowledgements.